ever worried that you might be the cool kid? You wear the latest fashions on top of all the trends? Or have you ever worried you were too much in the mainstream? Always so generic, more normal than your friends? Well, we've devised a test to put to rest your fears. There's no need to panic if you lend us your ears. Tonight you can't sleep easy after all that you've heard. Cause if you like the show, then you're probably a nerd. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all. It's Canon with Tyler, Phil, and Boris. Oh, Canon, it's Canon, it's all in Canon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the It's Canon podcast. We're doing something a little special today. We're going to have a little bit of fun today as we talk all things Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1, Chapter 9. I am your host, I'm Boris, and today we are joined by Phil.
Oh man, that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah. And we are also...
Could they complicate it anymore?
No. Not at all.
We have a guest here with us.
We do have a guest.
We have a guest here with us. We have Carl Milroy from Red Thread Brewing. Carl, introduce yourself.
How are we doing, guys? Yeah, Carl from Red Thread Brewing. So we're like a local craft brewing company. We make sort of well-balanced, sessionable beers that people tend to enjoy and, have fun doing that. And we're also Star Wars fans, too, which is probably why we're here.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. So thanks again for coming on. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to chat all things Mandalorian episode 9. We're going to go deep in spoilers. So if you have not watched the episode just yet, you may want to stop this podcast, pause it, watch the episode, come back, and listen to us chat all about it.
Yeah, spoiler heavy, everyone. So I think we've universally decided that Mando Mondays are now going to be spoiler Mondays. So when you're listening to the show, it is advised you watch it. This week's show was a little bit more substantial than previous episodes that we've had. It bounded past that half-hour mark. Not huge, though. Not as much as I thought it would. But we're going to break it down and get our reactions out there to you, and want to hear from you guys about what you thought, or if you don't really like any of the opinions, let us know. You know, we want to know more about how this is all going over for everybody, because I think I'm safe to say I'm pretty satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carl, you were happy?
Season 2, yeah, I would say so. I'm actually going to throw it out there. I wasn't a huge fan of season 1, and I think maybe a couple of reasons. Like I felt like the episodes were maybe a little too short, and I know I guess they were going for a bit of that Western feel as well, like Jon Favreau. I think the issue for me was probably hyped up too much, right? Like I think there was just such a build up, and I ended up seeing it not right away, and then reading so much on the internet and social media. I was like, oh my gosh, there's like a baby Yoda, and this is going to be the best thing ever, and it's good reviews. And then I think when I saw it, I was like, oh, all right, I liked it, but
yeah, that's fair. Boris?
Yeah, no, I overall I'm happy, I'm satisfied. Not every episode from season 1 was great, but I find that the pacing, the content, the overall cliffhanger was very exciting for Chapter 9. So I'm actually really looking forward to the rest of the season right now.
Yeah, and really, I guess we'll start at the beginning here. And we see basically Mando returning to Tatooine, which I think is probably, I was thinking about this yesterday, probably the most visited planet in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like the amount of events prequel-wise, just with the original series and throughout all these add-ons, it's got to be the least mystical Star Wars place there is in the Star Wars universe. However, that being said, one of the things that I did enjoy about this episode, and we're going to get into it here, is just how much extra they were able to deliver in this episode that really seemed like it wasn't too much of fan service. So, we see Mando basically returning back to Tatooine, landing in that port, and meeting up with the mechanic lady. And I apologize to all the sweaty Star Wars nerds, I forget her name. But anyhow, and actually agreeing to letting the droids work on his ship, the Razor Crest, which I think really signifies some character growth from last season, where he was so dead set against droids that he allowed them to do a once over on the Razor Crest and proceed with the typical shenanigans. There was also, a little bit of the reunion. Return with Baby Yoda and the mechanic who cared for him basically that whole episode. It was episode 5, and there is a lot of linkage between episode 5 and this one, which is subtle, I guess, and that's what we're going to get down to in terms of opening this up. But did anyone notice anything out of that opening little, like, first 10 minutes beyond the this is what happened last season and the establishing of the return to Tatooine? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I loved how they went back, right? Like that's, I think they played a lot of homage to the first original films. And like you say, they probably tried to draw in the fans a bit. So adding some of those elements was a great move. I didn't notice. Yeah. I don't think anything other than you say, like just the little subtleties, letting the droids now work on his ship and showing how he's changed for sure.
And the one thing that I did kind of notice, and I had to go back and rewatch it just to know the exact placement of it, was basically the fact that R5D4 made a return. And this was the original droid that Luke had chosen, and the motivator was bad and it blew in A New Hope. And they even had it down to the fact that there was scarring or scorch marks on R5D4's head where that motivator blew. I thought that was a bit obvious, but, not too subtle of an inclusion. And we have to mention as well, this is the first episode that Jon Favreau has actually directed out of The Mandalorian. Last season, he had guest directors for every episode. So I think this one was an important one for him to get in and establish that he is a bona fide Star Wars, director, creator, jewel of Disney at this point. Boris, you see anything? You catching anything with those eagle eyes, or you were just like, I don't give a crap?
No, at that point, I think I was still just being entertained with the fact that we do have a new season. So, I was just paying attention to the dialogue, outside of the subtleties and those homages that you guys have already mentioned. I haven't really, didn't take anything new. But again, one thing that I did appreciate was the fact that they kind of do already link the two seasons together. You see growth at this point. And yeah, we're kind of getting the foundation of what the rest of the episode is going to bring to us.
Exactly. So basically, at this point, Mando is looking for a Mandalorian, and there is a vagueness about this in terms of, well, I guess the opening sequence was really the Gamorrean guard fight and all that, which there was a lot of little nuggets in there. But it got the direction. Yeah, with John Leguizamo as the Cyclops guy. There was a lot of that was basically where he found his mission to go and get to Tatooine to look for a Mandalorian. And I think that there was vagueness in that. So it's a question of, is he looking for a Mandalorian on Tatooine because that's our last known whereabouts, or is he looking for a specific Mandalorian? Like, is he? It just really, to me, it was just like, it's just a little bit vague because it's just using that word. And is it a person? Is it things that Mandalorians have, like armor and whatnot? And we have a fast forward at that, like we basically see him going out to this spot very similar to Camino in the prequels, where it's like it's not on a map, but he goes out to this moss port. And yeah, sure enough, there's this encampment, and right away, right off the bat, we've got Timothy Olyphant in the armor, in Boba Fett's armor. Unmistakable. I was a little bit shocked at the pacing of that it wasn't something that was teased over multiple episodes, because I think that that's an asset for Disney. But it was interesting for me, at least, to see them go for the throat and have that confrontation right at the beginning, right? Like we got a lot of story and setup in a very short amount of time, because at that point we have a crate dragon flow through the city and eat a bantha. And it sets up this whole community that they're going to be creating and fighting for. Anybody with some thoughts on that breakout or that exciting kind of reveal?
Yeah, I liked it. Like you say, it they threw it in there right away, right? Having like, wow, he found him so quickly, like the other Mandalorian, like what's going to happen? Like right away, my brain was like, oh my gosh, what are these two Mandalorians now going to do together as a team? Like, boom. And obviously that wasn't the case, right? So maybe that was a good thing. But you talked about it earlier. When he was searching for the Mandalorian, I wonder if that was like was that being very specific, because that's sort of the last known spot for Mandalorian that we've seen as fans, right? Having Boba, go down in the Sarlacc pit. So was that kind of obvious, or was it not? I wonder.
Yeah, it really. I just question that relay of information and the intention behind it. So, regardless, it ends up in the fan favorite, because I know that when I was growing up, I think probably my favorite action figure in Star Wars was Boba Fett.
Easily.
Just for his sheer looks, right?
Oh yeah, easily. I still have one. Big.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably my most collectible, and the thing I desire the most out of the collectibles that I pursue with the 100%. Most reckless abandon with my wallet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Boris, were you a Boba Fett fan?
I was, but not the biggest of fans. Like, I wasn't obsessed with him like a lot of people are. I didn't really have any of his toys, but he was a character that was cool looking. He was a character that you kind of wanted to know more of for me, but he wasn't kind of like the end all be all character like he is for a lot of people. My end all be all character would probably be R2.
Wow. Interesting choice.
Didn't expect that.
Yeah.
For me growing up, it was Boba, right? Like there was such mystery around him. He was so cool. We knew so little about him.
Yeah, it's almost like that Phasma positioning.
Yep.
That they did, where it's like, okay, the looks are there, the hook is in, and it's a question of, do I gorge myself on it, or what are they going to do with the character? And I think that a lot of the fans are probably most upset about how much actual screen time Boba Fett did get in 2 movies originally, that we had to wait so long in order for them to be fully realized in kind of the prequels. And even then it didn't. I was a little bit conflicted about that whole situation. It just seemed to be a little, it's tough going back and filling in the story like that. We know the ending, we know the inevitability at that point. But yeah, it was like Carl was saying, it was an absolutely huge character for us, and it kind of got revealed in the the books and that expanded universe that Boba Fett got an amazing backstory and was basically fantasized about or whatever by the fan base at that point. And it's kind of interesting to see, like, this, we find out in the show that he takes off his helmet, and which I think is really funny watching Mando react to that, because it's like it's like, well, let's just have a drink. And then he just immediately takes off the helmet. So Mando immediately knows at that point, I'm not dealing with a Mandalorian. Right? Yeah. Like this isn't happening the way I thought it would be. This guy's just got the armor. So then immediately the mission changes to, I want to reclaim that armor because that's the right thing. That's what I'm mandated to do. And it's Timothy Olyphant playing a character that was in Aftermath. Cad Vance, I believe his name is. Yeah. And It was basically a character that I tried to go back and research about the timelines that Chuck Wendig was visiting, and does it line up with the Mandalorian? And most of the stuff was retroactive in terms of the storytelling involving this character. So it definitely does line up canon-wise, which I think Boris is going to be very happy about.
Yep. Because you know that I guess, fear for a lot of the new Star Wars stories that we're getting is that because of the comics and the books and the video games, and because of the fact that not everyone has access to those plot points, that on the movies and TV shows, they're just going to rewrite the canon. But I'm happy to see that they are kind of still all connected in some shape, way, or form.
Yeah, and it's important because as fans, we visit that material and form an opinion, and when they retcon it, it's not fun, right? It causes issues for us. So that was definitely kind of cool to see. And then the crate dragon, they call it a crate dragon. That was interesting for me because I think one of the first images out of A New Hope was, that snake-like creature, the bones on Tatooine. Yeah, exactly. And to see it on screen and kind of put two and two together and go, oh my goodness, this is actually happening. Like we're getting into, like I say, the lore of Tatooine, and really exploring it in a non-insulting way. You know what I mean? It's not heavy-handed fan service. It's, well, if you care, there's this link, right?
It's the subtleties.
Yeah, the subtleties. And I think that goes a long way in terms of cultivating the fans, even like placating the fans even more.
That's true. It was really subtle, right? It wasn't like, remember when they redid the original series and they just digitally added in all these beasts walking around and made it really clunky? Right? That was terrible, right?
Yeah.
Whereas here, you're right. It's just enough, very subtle.
Yeah. And, at that point, the Marshal and Mando go out to, I guess, scout the habitation of this crate dragon, and they encounter probably for me one of the most sketchiest scenes, or my least favorite out of this whole episode, and that was the dogs in kind of like that rocky caveat crevasse area, and then Mando like being able to talk to the dogs
like Crocodile Dundee or something, like
yeah, at first it came across as like really hokey, and then it turns out there's the Sand People's pets, which were introduced in the prequels, and I don't know, I get it. Like, we're establishing that Boba, like the Mandalorian, has a long history linked to Tatooine. And he did have episode 5, again, one of the parallels. He conversed with the Sand People or the Tusken Raiders by using hand gestures and negotiating, but he didn't actually break out the whole, language. Yeah,
the linguistics, yeah.
Yeah, and it just reminded me a little bit of my least favorite sequence out of Solo, when Han talks to Chewie in, like, the Wookiee language, the Kashyyykian. It just felt like, oh, come on. Like, if I know that Han understands Chewie, but I always thought that understanding was loosely based on a little bit of the linguistics and a lot of history to immediately establish that character relationship as and I'm uncomfortable, man. I wouldn't be extremely fond of that as an actor. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Boris?
Yeah, no, I'm rethinking this scene now, and I think it was the most kind of like not even hokey, just kind of shoehorned in. They could have gone another way to reintroduce the Sand People and Mando. Yeah, like, I can see where you're coming from. Overall, but yeah, it was what it was. It didn't really feel. It felt shoehorned in, and it didn't kind of feel necessary in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Very, very shoehorned. That was almost like the scene too, where he's trying to find the Mandalorian, right? And he had that quick fight sequence, when they're watching the fight.
Mm-hmm.
I know they had to develop it somehow to say, how's he going to hunt down? How's he going to get a lead on the Mandalorian? But felt a bit shoehorned in there too. Actually brings up another thought. What are your thoughts on, because there's John Leguizamo, right? Was the voice, and I know they've used Nick Nolte. What are your thoughts on sort of incorporating celebrity into Star Wars, be it the Mandalorian or the new movies?
Well, I think Star Wars can do it, or Lucasfilm can do it, and not have to really pay for it, and which is why they do it. I think you get, the Bill Burrs, and you get, the voice acting I know you're specifically referencing to. I think those people are happy to do the studio work and happy to have a voice in the Star Wars universe.
Sure.
And I think, they'd go, you know what, you could pay me in buttons and I'd do this. Like, I really don't care. It's not a paycheck, really. It's, guild rates and away we go. And you get the benefit of attracting that actor's fan base, because I know that I've had people text me and contact me and say, I didn't realize X person was actively in this show. I want to watch it now because of that. Yeah, because of that. They're like, I never thought that person would do Star Wars. And here you're telling me that must mean the show really is different, in reference to the hype and whatnot. So I think that there's a benefit to it. I don't mind it as long as the people fit. Nick Nolte doing Queel from season 1 was awesome. It ended up being a great performance, like not only with the costume and whatnot, which obviously wasn't him wearing, but just the voicing and the subtleties there within. Because a lot of the time we don't even realize these cameos or this voice work is being done, right? It's so subtle that it's like we actually had a debate Friday night on the internet where was John Leguizamo's voice? Like, which character was he? We saw his name in the end credits, but we didn't quite know. Was he the Cyclops or was he someone else? There was legitimate questioning going on the internet Friday about that until somebody, with authority says, yes, that was him. Mm-hmm. That now we all hang our hats on it. Boris, what do you think about the situation of talent recruitment and voice acting in Star Wars?
I think that it's a huge benefit. Like you mentioned, you get to expand your audience through these celebrities. I think it's smart, and it's kind of turning into something that Star Wars is known for. Taking an A-list or B-list celebrity and, putting them behind a mask, putting them in a monster suit. It's kind of becoming a thing now. So whatever works to expand the possible Star Wars audience, I'm game for. And, overall, as long as it's not cheesy or out of place or dumb, go for it. But, as long as it's kept subtle, I can live with it. And hopefully they continue that route.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the voice I'm fine with. The voiceovers, that makes sense. And like you say, like Nick Nolte knocked it out of the park. That was great. I just don't want to, I didn't enjoy the earlier movies when I'm watching, like you're in the immersed in the Star Wars universe, and then you're like, oh, there's the guy from Party of Five, like on the radar screen or whatever. Like, come on, So yeah, you want to hide him in a stormtrooper's costume, go for it. But
yeah, well, the actor has to fit the role, right? I agree. Like, I wouldn't be able to handle like a comedian that didn't fit the place, like Bill Burr last year in that heist episode. He fit, like, and he's unabashed about the fact that he doesn't care for Star Wars. He's just like, I don't give a shit about this universe. Like, I really don't. Like, it's but that's who he is, and that's who his character was, and that's what was expected of that character. It's like, we need you to be hard-nosed, run the crew. You're going to be deceiving Mando. You're going to be betraying your crew potentially, and you got to kind of be that hard ass, right? And have that presence and command of it. And it's like, yeah, and he also does, F is for family, and he also does, his whole stand-up thing. So I guess the context of knowing him and being able to suspend that is kind of key for that recruitment of the character, because if it's someone who you just don't respect or whatnot, it could get awkward for the sake of doing it. But I think that's why they do what they do in the recruitment.
Well, they just must have a huge demand for it too, right? And from Hollywood, right, trying to be in that movie, like from everything you've read, right, the shows and the movies, and plus, I think with the pandemic, like a lot of those actors now are like Hollywood's kind of died in a way, right? Everyone's focused on the small box, on the streaming services, right? So you don't have these big productions anymore. So for them, it's a way to stay relevant, I think.
Oh, big time. We talk about that on the show a lot, about the refocus of Disney, the refocus of basically media to get off those big screens and to get into our homes, right? And especially in a paid subscription format. That's the key towards growing this. And I think a lot of people have come out and said it, and I'll join the choir here. I want the future of Star Wars to be in television. I will take away 8 hours of each season and happily cut it apart and digest it versus a 2-hour rushed movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You look at Rise of Skywalker and how that was absolutely like two movies kind of run in together, that was paced in such a crazy way. It almost didn't make sense at certain points. It like we talked about it with Joey there last week from Brews and Blasters about just how euphoric you were afterwards because you didn't know what the hell happened. Like it was just, and then there was the Emperor, and then there was Kylo, and then there was Rey, and then there was this, and then there was that. Whereas I want that story, I want that breakdown, I want these little nuggets, right? The being able to explore and think about the Tusken Raiders, probably one of my most disposable races in Star Wars that just have brief influence on anything. And then you find out that they have this whole language, culture, ethos, and point of view. They almost represent Aboriginal kind of people where they're cast off from our society and they're not viewed upon as equal beings or people that deserve representation at the table, but they absolutely do, right? They make reference to it in the next scene where they're like passing around a thing of like this weird water thing that they puncture. And Timothy, like the marshal, is like, this smells disgusting. I don't want to drink this. And he throws it down, and then it agitates and increases the tension between the Tuskens and the settlers, the white people, the people. Like it really set up that Western of cowboys versus Indians.
You know what? That's a great point. Like I had flashbacks to like so many Westerns and other movies where they're sitting around, with the indigenous people and they're passing around the peyote, right?
Yeah.
Like absolutely. So I think you're bang on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like, there's no accidents here. This is Jon Favreau, right? Yeah. Like we have to understand Star Wars in essence is a space Western, right? Like it's always been at its root. And this is the literal exploration of that. Right, Boris?
Yeah, that's exactly it. One point that I wanted to bring up that you did earlier is in regards to, the future being in television rather than movies. And I want to add something to that point, and that is now on television, and we're really seeing this with Mandalorian, is that, on TV you're not going to get some hokey, campy, kind of low-budget type Star Wars series. Like if this were the 90s or the early 2000s, it would not be this. It would not be what we're seeing. The budget now for TV shows are just so much higher. The visual effects are just so much more practical. They're even developing new ways to film Mandalorian, so the budget is there now. So I think now that the budget is not equal to a movie, but comparable in a sense, and it doesn't look campy, it doesn't look cheesy, so I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good point as well, because I had a friend who's a normie. He's not a huge Star Wars fan. He's not sweaty like us. And he said, well, the special effects, he's like, this is the first time where I'm really noticing that the special effects in this TV show are on par with a movie. And that was the signal to him that the transition's on. And I'm just laughing my ass off at him because he's a video game guy. And I'm like, they're using the Unreal Engine to make this. Like, it literally is developed and projected onto that volume that they've created. Where, it's all practical effect, even when it's, compute, like it's the characters are reacting to it in real time. They've got a really good sense for what's happening instead of like the prequels where it's, everything's green and George is like, look over there and act in horror as the giant, the giant spider thing attacks you in this, and there's going to be Jedi all around, and you know what I mean? Like, he's just like, imagine this. Now I need you to, whereas the actors in this case are able to sell the whole experience, right? Because they're experiencing it too. And yeah, so, and it's kind of is another comment that I'd seen on the internet, and it revolves around the ease of which Timothy Olyphant can just take the helmet off. And I'm pretty sure that created a lot of conflict for Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
We've all heard those rumors that Pedro was unhappy with how much he had to keep the helmet on. He found it uncomfortable. He wanted to kind of be in that universe because here he is being Les. Timothy's just like, oh, let's have some spotchka, and pulls off Boba Fett's helmet, and it's like, oh, there's Timothy Olyphant's like perfect teeth and wonderful hair, and he's just reprising his role as the Deadwood Marshal, and I'm just like, oh man, like, yeah, that is pretty rough. I was a little bit sympathetic with Pedro at that point, but we'll keep on going here. Essentially they're now tasked with having to rouse the town with aligning with the Tusken Raiders and trying to defeat this crate monster, this crate dragon. And it's, they have to go back and sell it to the people. Right. And again, Timothy can just, be himself and, sit there and go, well, here's the bad part. We got to kill this thing. It gets even worse, though. We got to do it with our supposed enemies. And out of this whole experience, obviously, respect between the two is the inevitable conclusion here, I think. And they had to set that up with some tension in terms of loading the ammo and getting it on the Banthas. I did like the fact that the Banthas all came in a line, because in the original Star Wars, the Tusken Raiders travel in a single file manner, so you can never determine their numbers, right? Obi-Wan said that. And yeah, I think there's also something for you guys to talk about here will be, I think this also sets up Obi-Wan, the new series with Ewan McGregor coming out, like starting up next March and probably hitting at the end of next year for Disney Plus. I think there's going to be an absolutely huge tie-in with these Tusken Raiders, which may be why we're getting them being kind of sold to us and their culture being kind of brought to us in this fashion. What are your thoughts on that, Carl?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like they are probably trying to ease us into it and get us a little bit familiar with them, right? So I think people enjoy familiarity, right? So as long as you can get some of those familiar concepts in a new show, then probably. I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah.
Yeah. So
Boris.
Yeah. So I think that I think you've hit a really good point. I do think that they're trying to sell us more on the Tusken Raiders, showing the relationship with the people who live on Tatooine, kind of showing that they are willing to work with people as long as, there's a mutual goal and a deal up front. So it's kind of interesting to kind of, expand that and say, okay, this is a plot point that is going to be revisited in an entire new show, entire new scale. And I think that one of the reasons why we were in Tatooine in general. Well, there was a few reasons, but I do believe one of the main reasons was kind of to give us that backdrop on kind of where Tatooine is post Empire.
Yeah. Yeah, because obviously, part of the prequel, like the pre-story as well, and Timothy Olyphant, kind of described the town got taken over, and then that's how he became the marshal, right? He encountered the Mandalorians or the armor on a Jawa cruiser, and he the infamous reintroduction of the ice cream maker with the treasure in it. They set up that part really well, Boris, and thanks. I skipped that over in my mind, where he had to free the town of those mining people that were turning them into slaves. They were retuning the town right away, right after the Death Star is destroyed. And the fall of the Empire goes through. Here they are setting up that post-apocalyptic world.
And I love that. Like the second they mentioned that, my mind started like flash, like I lost the show, right? And I just started flash forwarding to all these like infinite possibilities about, like post Empire, like what happens to the whole universe, what's going on here, there, and all these scenarios, right? And then, I got drawn right back into the show, but just for that brief instant, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, you're right. And it was just a neat segue, I thought.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest area that Disney have to mine is that space between Empire and the First Order, right? Or like Return of the Jedi and First Order, Force Awakens. It's a huge time gap, and it offers a lot of storytelling in there. So, and it's going to be interesting to see this rewind into Ewan McGregor and Obi-Wan, because obviously Ewan McGregor doesn't befriend the Sand People the same way that Mando does. Because Mando can go up to them and say, hey, how's it going? What's up? And pet their dogs and do whatever he wants and negotiate and whatnot. And you think about New Hope, Obi-Wan has to scare the crap out of them in order to get them to go away, right? Like, leave Luke alone, and does that infamous battle cry and whatnot to get them off of Luke. So that's going to be, I think, a point of tension in Obi-Wan. But that's speculation on my part. So
true. That's probably a sign of the times too, right? You think of the 70s versus, now we're just more tolerant of other societies and ethnicities. Whereas back then you're like, no, somebody else is different from us, kill them.
Yeah, it's
take
true.
Their stuff, right?
And it's going to be interesting. I do like that. That's a really good point, Carl, about how it reflects society today and our tolerances and inclusionary goals. Like, I think we have a long way to go here in Canada as far as that, but I'd like to see more progress on it. But yeah, it's a good sign when it shows up in popular media like this.
Yeah, and the other parallel with real life was during Cobb Vanth's backstory. I love the fact that the night that they got word that the second Death Star exploded, the mining community, makes their attack. So it's like, Empire's gone, all hell's literally breaking loose so that they can, get their ground, claim their territory.
Yeah, it was pretty stark. It was pretty harsh. Like, there wasn't some span of time where it's like, okay, the Empire's gone, pieces returned to the universe, or whatever the situation is. It just illustrates an instant anarchy, right? Like, instant political destabilization just with that happening.
And you got to think the huts were gone too, right? So there's another vacuum as well.
Yep. And they would be recently gone, right? Mm-hmm. Because this is all on the heels of literally days after the huts. Yep. At least one of the major huts has been taken out. So we walk this forward a little bit, and we see basically they go through and do some big work together to plant these explosives. There's the inevitable battle, and obviously in a very dramatic way. There's our one last hope again. I thought some of the dialogue in this area was a little bit weak. I just think that the way that the Mandalorian kind of set up that last, we're going to get it to eat the bantha with the explosives laden on it after failure with the original plan, and not really communicating that to Timothy Olyphant, like to the marshal, and saying to him like, hey, I need you to do this, or give me the detonator, and I'm gonna trick it into swallowing the bantha. No, he's just like, give it to me. This is our only hope. That type of attitude about this thing. And he had the time to expand on it. It wasn't like it was like this he sees it and he's got 2 seconds to act. And there's also the point that I picked up on right away, that he basically just nicked that backpack and away it goes again. There's something defective about that Mandalorian backpack.
The extra button on the back.
Yeah, because it seems like everybody knows that exploit. Han Solo blind can kill Boba Fett by hitting that backpack. And then here we have him like, go protect the child. So, yeah, it was kind of funny. It was a parallel. Obviously, it was, I think, again, it was reaching out to the fans and showing what they can do. But like that consistency within the universe, I guess. And it becomes a meme, right? Just like the ice cream maker.
Yeah, I thought when I saw it, I could almost picture, all the writers and the producers sitting around, talking about and building the story in the room. Like one guy's like, yeah, and like, let's have him hit the backpack button and then it'll shoot off just like, they're all dying laughing or something. I can just totally picture that.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? Like it's one of those things that Star Wars does hokey things sometimes. And I think that this held consistent within that decision process. Like, one thing that maybe it's a facepalm for some people, but for other people that are like, oh my goodness, that was beautiful. You know what I mean? I don't know where exactly I land on it. I lean towards more the facepalm, but I do get it. I do enjoy its awkwardness and exploitive callback, I guess. Boris, what do you think about all of that stuff? Did you pick up on any of it?
Yeah, I picked up on it. And again, I was more, I don't know. I've only seen this episode once, so the first time I watched anything, I kind of just take it for what it is. Typically, when I start picking stuff like those subtle stuff up, it's more like second, third viewing. But it was kind of funny, and it kind of to me, it also reinforced the fact that in case you had any doubt that this was Boba Fett's old armor, we're going to do this callback to something that, you all recognize.
Yeah, and here's another way that I think that callback happened or will be foreshadowing something. The fact that the Mandalorian goes into the beast, detonates the bantha, like he shoots his way out, electrifies the crate dragon with his Mando magic wand there, and goes flying out, detonates the thing, and then it explodes everywhere. Like the spitting of the acid surprised me with that creature's attack. Like, first off, I thought that was a little bit next level for Mandalorian to do. It was a little bit gross and definitely upped the stakes in that battle. Like I don't fully like, I think that it leads us to some kind of inevitability that if they want to close off how Boba Fett escaped the Sarlacc, it's going to either involve him fighting his way out of its guts, or there's also the possibility that the crate dragon ate the Sarlacc and that freed the Mando. Like, that freed Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm. Like, didn't they allude to that or no? Didn't they say
they did? Yeah. There was a statement, but it was very vague. It didn't specify. So you're kind of left to think, did the crate dragon eat the Sarlacc? Because, the comment is, it's an abandoned Sarlacc nest. And I go, well, I've lived on this planet for my whole life, and I've never heard of that, basically, was what Cad Vanth had said regarding Sarlaccs. And, you digest over 1,000 years, right? Mm-hmm. As we know from Return of the Jedi. And it's very painful. So it does seem to indicate that you are alive for the suffering. So it's not like you get ingested, you're dead. And then obviously Boba Fett has a lot of toys on his pack. I prefer to think of him escaping with the aid of this crate dragon, and then just getting the heck out of there. His armor is so compromised, or he wants to walk away from being that person. He wants a different life.
Yeah.
Because eventually we see, just so we can all get to the conclusion and give a wrap, we get to the point where we see a mysterious character. You know, Cad gives the armor back to Mando very amicably and peacefully, which I think, you know, he's shown his commitment to the town, so he doesn't feel that he needs to be armored in that way. He feels that the townspeople will probably have his back going forward as the marshal. And he gives the armor up very, very, you know, appropriately. Mando, you know, to all the people that called it out in the trailer, that did all the freeze frames and identified that the backpack was on the speeder bike on that outgoing shot, congrats to you, because you were bang on. So I know in the future, when you guys deconstruct these trailers, I will give it a little more attention myself. He basically, like, it ends with him taking off and you know, with a big hunk of meat as well of the dragon.
Yeah. Dinner.
Yeah, exactly. He's got dinner for a while. And we see basically the Boba Fett nowadays standing there in Tusken with a Tusken Raider gun and the pike, and some dark robes, watching him go off. And it's the original actor from Jango Fett, so it's the logical growth of Boba, his clone. So I don't know, like, and he looked injured. He didn't look like a happy boy.
Yeah, he was all scarred.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cool. Like, you know, you kind of knew at some point, you know, there was the tease, you know, with the armor, the fact that we're on Tatooine, the fact that we are looking for other Mandalorians. You know, you were kind of expecting at this point that Boba Fett would show up, but the way that they did the reveal was like really bang on, really cool, you know, and it's kind of like the hunter being the hunted now. Like, you know, why is Boba Fett watching over Mando? It obviously wasn't, you know, by chance. I feel like there was something more to it. So, you know, it really does a great job of not only, you know, boom, Boba Fett's back, but now we can think and build upon this over the entire season. Like, it'll be interesting when they revisit this, because I could, you know, Mando's going to probably leave Tatooine at this point. So who knows what the plan is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think all point, like, everything points to the fact that it is probably Boba, but don't we have to sort of discuss the fact that it might not be Boba? Like, it could be some sort of other clone or something.
Yep. I think we're pretty firm in knowing it's Boba Fett, because Boba Fett is accredited with being in every episode this season.
Oh, okay.
Or you know, there's that hint. It's a rumor. But as well, they titled it could be a clone. You're right. It very much could be. But I think the actor's own website lists him as portraying Boba Fett.
Oh, okay.
So I think the mystery is kind of off on that. So I think that's where we're supposed to be leaning our speculation, deliberately by Lucasfilm at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You know, everything points to that. You know, and it's a beautiful tie-in. So that was my first thought too. But then, as you know, I thought about it and digested it a bit. I was like, well, wait a minute. Is that too obvious? Maybe it's not. Maybe that's what I want, and maybe there's another angle or something they're going for. But
yeah, and further into that speculation thing, it's rumored that Boba Fett will be getting his own Disney Plus series.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know. It's interesting that Boris brought up that he thinks it's going to lead to a potential conflict, which is always a possibility. Especially with the reveal of a character like that. I don't know. Does it also represent the point that there maybe is a potential collaboration? Because to me, seeing Boba in those robes, and I know they're not specifically Sand People robes. Like, first of all, I watched that first episode with headphones on, and when Boba walks, he makes the noise. He makes the jangle, the spurs jangle from episode 5. And every time Boba Fett's on screen, he makes that noise when he walks. So it's an audio cue to all the fans that it's actually boba as well. That further reinforces it, but it's really subtle one. It's a deep, deep cut. If you don't have your audio tweaked, you'll miss it. I think that it sets up that maybe there's going to be the potential tie-in is going to be Boba trying to reclaim his armor, either through conflict or earning it back from the Mandalorian, and trying to actually have to prove. And the Mandalorian needs Boba. He doesn't need the armor. That's just like, oh shit, now I got a mission to find where I can get rid of this stuff and properly care for it. But his real mission was to find a Mandalorian. And I know that there's debate and whatnot about, like, first of all, that armor isn't the armor is in Beskar. It's Durasteel, according to Canon. So I think there's some retconning that's going to happen on the Star Wars website about that, because obviously they're establishing that this is a pretty darn strong set of armor. There's also going to be the fact that people will say that Boba Fett isn't a true Mandalorian, but I think that will be retconned as well, because they basically started that process by stating that Mandalorian's a creed, not a race. I just think that there's obviously an exciting large amount of crossover now. Maybe it has to do with merchandising as well. Like it's just so much stuff here on the plus side for Disney. I just hope they don't mess it up. And basically, I see that this whole episode very much mirrored the first episode of season 1, like chapter 1, because we have this whole build up all the way through the episode. And then at the end of the first chapter, we get Baby Yoda. I think this sets up that Baby Yoda this time is Boba Fett.
Yeah.
So the whole build up, and then here's Boba Fett for 2 seconds on your screen. And guess what? He's going to be the most important character going for this season. You know,
I certainly hope so. And after all, the show is called The Mandalorian, so you kind of like, that's your first thought when they created this season. You're like, is Boba back in this somehow? Like that was literally my first thought. Yeah,
it's exciting. So there we have it, folks. That is episode 9, which feels weird to say. This episodic count, season 2, episode 1. It's in the books. What are all of our reactions? Boris, how do you feel about this whole thing, this whole experiment? Overall, after the deep dive that we did.
I'm fairly positive. I'm liking this. I'm enjoying this. Good chat. Get to talk our, arguably the biggest show this fall. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're going to be exploring week to week now. And posting a special spoiler episode.
Yeah.
And hopefully getting some guests to join us like Carl did today.
Yeah,
Carl, any final thoughts on the excitement level? Have we amped it up for you? Or is it meeting expectation or skewering below? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm enjoying the ride. Certainly anything that provides us with a bit of normalcy in this crazy world, in this pandemic world is welcome, right? I enjoyed it. Like I said, I didn't love the first season of Mandalorian, but I definitely thought this was an improvement on it. And maybe that was, I don't know if that was Favreau's directing, but or maybe it was just so many bones and homages to the original series for the fans. But I definitely thought it was an improvement on season 1.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as everybody knows, I'm going to be excited. I don't care. Star Wars is an awful lot like pizza. Even if it's bad, it's good. Just like Fearless Fred always says.
Yep.
So I think it was a very good pizza for the records out there.
Right.
It's definitely something I'm looking forward to. Carl, I want you to tell people about your great brewery and about your products that you're offering and where they can get them.
Sure. That's awesome. Thanks, Phil. So we're a relatively newish company, about 3.5 years old. We're based out of Newmarket, Ontario. You can find our stuff sort of spattered across York region, various bars and restaurants when they're open. Most of them are closed right now. A few local grocery stores, such as like Vince's, and there's some Sobeys and Loblaws's, but then mostly sort of LCBO as well. So you can find us at a lot of the LCBO. So if you go to lcbo.com, you can look them up and and find our beers such as Make Tracks, and of course our collaboration with the Red Patch Boys, the Red X Red Ale. Yeah.
Awesome. And if people want to order it off your website, obviously I know that you do some delivery options and some ordering options. Where can they find that website?
100%. So our website is www.rtbrewing.ca. So just RT Brewing is short for Red Thread Brewing. You can also hit us any way you want: email, text, phone call, direct message on social, which is actually a way a lot of people order now rather than sort of traditional website. They just usually reach out to us. And you're right, we do home delivery, and we can get it turned around pretty quick for you. So that's keeping us alive during these times.
Yeah, and what's your? I see that you do a lot of work on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle? Because I know I follow and I see you guys posting lots of great pictures and experiences, mountain biking, and I know you're very active in the snow sports as well, like skiing, snowboarding, stuff like that, which is obviously all linked to Make Tracks and whatnot. And you even have a COVID beer as well to benefit some of the local area workers and whatnot during this crisis, right? So what's your Instagram handle?
Yeah, 100%. So everything's RT Brewing. So it's at RT Brewing. That's, be it Twitter or Instagram. And you're right, we do a lot with the snow sports. And our COVID beers kind of taking off. It's done well. And we give $5 to the South Lake Hospital for every case purchased.
Awesome. Well, I just got to say thank you for all your hard work. I've been a customer for a long time now. And we have that collaboration with our soccer, with TFC, with the Red Patch Boys. It's been just such a pleasurable experience, and it's kind of why Boris and I were talking about it. And we said, we really got to get Carl onto the show just to talk about this whole thing and this whole effort, because it is such an important part of our community, and we got to look out for our local businesses, everyone. So maybe next time that you're in the beer store or you're at home wanting some beer to drink, let's not give the money to Molson's and whatnot. Let's think about our local community and our local craft breweries. All of them are needing our help right now. So I just want to thank you and Boris for joining me in our first breakdown of Season 2, Mandalorian. And this is Phil. I'm going to throw it over to Boris to take us out, my friend.
Thanks, Phil. That's right. This was Mandalorian Chapter 9 review on the It's Canon podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things geek. We talk a little bit about comic books, a little bit about video games, toys, Star Wars, Lego, beer, anything and everything. And Phil, Carl, do you know what the best part about all of this is?
I heard somewhere on the internet that it's all in Canon.
There you go.
So I just also want to point out to everybody, you can find us at www.itscanonpodcast.com. You can track us down on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at It's Canon Podcast. You can email us at show@itscanonpodcast.com. You can subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, anywhere that you find podcasts, you're going to find the It's Canon Podcast. And yeah, folks, be safe out there. Smash the subscribe button. Leave us some comments. And I hope everybody's safe. And we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.